Merkel is a good person to bring up, I think, in a conversation about humanitarian responses to what happened with migration starting in 2015, because she was really considered sort of the moral leader of Europe with initially at least an open arms policy, which she later moderated.
Right.
So I go back to the moral question and also the issue of identity, which you bring up, and who gets to take claim for what it means to be European. So European identity or American identity means one thing to a daughter of immigrants. To me, it means opportunity, individual rights, inalienable rights, things like that. And yet, the paradox is these far-right groups are claiming national identity as their own. And their national identity tends to be one that I think is anti-universal human rights. So how do you square that and that battle? And is that ultimately, this is the fraught phrase, is that ultimately a clash of cultures as well, a clash of civilizations even?
Well, what is good nationalism is a very fraught question in Europe, not in the United States. In the United States, it's become a fraught question because of Trump and white nationalism.
Yeah.
But until then, patriotism, in the way that you've just described it, is a consensual thing, even if those of us on the left are a little queasy about it, okay? Because nationalism led Europe into apocalypse in World War II, and arguably really in both wars, nationalism is a bad thing. The advent of the EU included an effort to create a new sense of community, European-ness. As an attempt to create an affirmative identity, it hasn't really succeeded. Yes, we're all European, and yes, we all value European civilization, and we have many things in common, but it's too thin an identity. And the effort to transfer those identities from your country to this abstract thing called Europe with its institutions that you don't like very much, the EU, hasn't worked. So there's a kind of vacuum of national identity. And the right has filled that with an explicitly anti-European, and as you say, anti-universal identity. To be German, from the point of view of the AfD, means to be against Europe. It means to return our country from the Europeanness and the universalization which Merkel has engaged in. So to say, as Merkel does, we're going to do this because we have a moral obligation according to international law, according to moral principles, according to European law, is a way of saying this is not about Germanness, or rather it's saying Germanness has to do with these universal principles. Well, then there are people who say, no, this is an ancient culture which has, we dress in a certain way, we eat in a certain way, we talk in a certain way, that's who we are. In Holland, you heard this, and it was very interesting because unlike Germany or Sweden or Poland, it's not very easy to say what is Dutch national. And so when you'd say to people, they were complaining that we're losing our sense of national identity.
What does that mean?
What's the thing that you're afraid of losing? And people bring up these odd things, like there's a big controversy in Holland over this Christmas figure called Black Peter. And Black Peter is a racist figure. He's like a pickaninny. He's Santa Claus's little helper. And there has been, understandably, a movement against that by Dutch people who are themselves black, but they're Dutch. And they don't want to think Holland's representation is this pickaninny-like figure. And so then, just like people in this country who say they're taking Christmas away from us, right? Because we have to say happy holidays. Come on. That's happened also in Holland, that Black Peter has become this, rallying
It's like
point.
identity politics played out on a world stage. Is all of this a backlash to globalization?
Well, I think so globalization would be, in a way, another way of talking about this question of a universal identity, right? A non-national, non-communal identity. And for people who are the beneficiaries of globalization, who can pick up at a moment's notice and fly from here to there, and actually have a familiar life there.
Yeah,
like
cosmopolitan.
My son lives in India. He was living in Calcutta, and now he lives in Delhi. Well, he loves them because they are radically different, but in each one of those places, he can find people like him.
Yeah.
Right? That's what globalization means for its winners. Now, other people, it is a word for a thing that is assaulting them. It's bringing in people who don't speak the same language that they do. It's transforming a world that they love and that they cherish and that they don't want to see go away. And so then it becomes a word for them for elites, for condescension to everything who I am. Now, to wish it away, as people like Donald Trump do, that obviously is the demagogic response. But the problem is real. And how you say to people who quite rightly think, they're not wrong, they are right in thinking that in many ways they're the losers of globalization. How you talk about that is one of the profound problems of liberal politics for this generation. Because if the answer is protectionism, well, that is suicide. It's not going to work better now than it did a century ago. But if there are not, if liberals can find some means of speaking to not just the economic, but also the cultural sense of loss that people have who have gotten the short end of the stick, well, they're going to keep losing.